Welcome to Fast Effect Double Speed Magic the Gathering from ELD's Time Vault Games Discord. We're playing live over the internet every Wednesday and Friday. We've got Bo on Death and Taxes versus Nick on Reanimator, a matchup that, believe it or not, heavily favors Bo, as Death and Taxes is an absolute nightmare for Reanimator to play against. Nick is going to need his very best draws to have a chance here, and Faithless Looting not often part of those draws. Typically, you're going to be seeing a Dark Ritual into Reanimate, perhaps a Thoughtseize in there as well to try and stop your opponent from easily answering whatever it is that you get out. And we see Gristlebrand go to the graveyard. Do we have a Lotus Petal? No. And a standard turn 2 here is going to be either Thalia or Stoneforge Mystic. You're not generally going to keep a game that doesn't have a strong 2-drop when you're playing Death and Taxes. And it looks like that Thalia is going to come down and slow down Nick. If he does have a card like Animate Dead, it's going to be much harder to cast here on turn 2. Faithless Looting all of a sudden going to need 4 mana to flash back. That is an amount of mana that Reanimator really doesn't want to ever get to. And he is fetching here. Now Reanimate would be able to bring back Gristlebrand, but Thalia would really limit any other interaction unless Nick has a Dark Ritual into a Reanimate. And it looks like he's going to power out and Exhume. But that is the end of the turn. Typically, Reanimator going to want to draw a ton of cards and then destroy your opponent's hand. And here we have a Flicker Wisp, which will be able to block Gristlebrand. Thalia turns sideways, gets in some damage. Gristlebrand's going to come back. So right now, Nick does not have any type of damage that he'll be able to do. We're going to see a Flicker Wisp block and then get pro-black. So no life gained. But he will be drawing some cards. Looks like he'll attempt to find perhaps a Thoughtseize or Unmask, something to stop this position from deteriorating. Ideally, if he can get a Elishnorn into play, that's going to be an excellent answer to most of what Death and Taxes is doing. Interesting, actually not drawing the cards on his turn. I'm a little surprised by that. Stoneforge Mystic coming down. Grabbing Batterskull. And really, the swing last turn, not really ideal. We've got an Entomb putting a Grave Titan into the graveyard. Now, this is not legendary, so it won't get destroyed by Karakas, which is a card you always have to worry about. And now Nick drawing some cards. He's entombed this Grave Titan. And we'll see if he can bring it back. I mean, with Thalia out, that's going to be a legit challenge. The fast mana of Dark Ritual at least gets you an extra mana, but it is nowhere near as explosive as you would normally be. It's really just handling Thalia's tax ability. A Dark Ritual into an Animate, and Grave Titan's going to bring some tokens. But Nick dangerously low here at just 7 life. And Bo with like 1 more mana will be able to actually put in Batterskull and then end up equipping to Flicker Wisp to deal lethal. So he does have a path in front of him here. His life is not in threat of completely disappearing. And I actually didn't follow that line. It must have been the Apparition, Skyclave Apparition taking out Animate Dead. Yeah, that's got to be it. That is a super legit Magic card. 3 mana Vindicates have actually been playable in this format. We've got an Unmask. Stoneforge is going to put in the Batterskull. And Nick is facing down 7 points of unblockable damage here. Paying for a Lotus Petal, paying for another Lotus Petal, but I suspect Bo is not going to miss this onboard kill. We're going to be going on to game 2 and 3, where Nick is also going to have to interact with all sorts of graveyard hate, potentially. Shipping the Germ, giving it pro-black, and crossing that finish line. Make your own Gristlebrand, 7/7 flying lifelink for Death and Taxes. Sorry, 7 power. It's actually a 7/5. But assembling your own Gristlebrand as Bo takes game 1, which is shockingly the expected outcome. I would probably say, let me know what you think in the comments. I think this is probably worse than a 25% matchup. I'd imagine Death and Taxes is going to win 75-80% of these matchups. Now, your absolute nut draws from Reanimator are still going to get there most of the time. But that's the thing. It's only most of the time. You can get a turn 1 Gristlebrand, draw a ton of cards, get another creature in play like an Elish Norn, and shred your opponent's hand all on the first turn. But then it's still going to take 2 turns of attacking to actually close the game out. So if your opponent does, for example, draw a Karakas as Death and Taxes, or if they just have one in their hand already, because you can't really get that out of their hand with your targeted discard, you're still going to see all of that unravel. So even your best draws, Death and Taxes often has an answer to. Yeah, the closer thing to like a unstoppable lock for this deck would be something along the lines of a Chancellor of the Annex along with a, say, Tidespout Tyrant, and just keep bouncing their 1 land over the course of the 2 turns. You know, that's pretty close to actually locking them out, as it doesn't walk into Karakas, which is an incredibly strong card in this matchup. I mean, I've sideboarded Karakas in Storm before, just because of its efficiency. And actually dealing with both of these decks, of course, you can use it to get rid of Thalia or Gaddock Teague from any type of hate bear strategy. And then on the other side, versus Reanimator, a lot of the time, they're going to have to try and kill you with a legendary creature. And I've had plenty of games as a Storm player versus Reanimator where they do something like get a Iona into play, thinking that that's going to actually stop me, like naming black. So it's like you can't do your tutors, your rituals, your tendrils, none of it. And you just Karakas it back to their hand. It's pretty devastating. Let's go ahead and skip past the shuffling. All right, a whole lot of shuffling there. Nick putting 1 on the bottom. He's got the play, though. And he's going to lead out with a double Lotus Petal into a Cabal Therapy, putting a Gristlebrand into the graveyard, Animate Dead, and he is tapped out, but he is going to go ahead and draw the cards. It may have been an error to not draw the cards last game, and Nick is not going to play this with any timidity whatsoever. A Unmask here is going to threaten to unravel Bo's hand, and he's got a couple of pieces of hate, but not much of a clock. So we see a Rest in Peace and a Grafdigger's Cage. And the Rest in Peace, okay. Oh no, actually the Skycloud Apparition. Skyclave Apparition, I think it is. Which I'm a little surprised by. We have a Grafdigger's Cage, which does land. Not actually sure what I would take there. Instinctively, like, I think the default play is grabbing the card that they can cast, which would be the Grafdigger's Cage. The general thought process there is I'd probably grab the Grafdigger's Cage and then look to dig to find more discard, hit the Rest in Peace, and then the next turn hit the the apparition, depending on how risk averse you are. You may be worried about the apparition. It going to the graveyard is a little bit of a pain. We've got a wear tear, so he has an answer for the Grafdigger's Cage, and I got to imagine we're going to see something coming in right now, because otherwise it'd be pretty tempting to just get the 2-for-1 when he plays the Rest in Peace, blow up the Grafdigger's Cage and the Rest in Peace with the same card. But no, Nick taking that one down, Bo tossing in the towel. Though he may not have been totally dead. I mean, Caracas could have potentially gotten him out of that situation. So we'll have plenty of time here for game number 3 as we skip past the shuffling. And Bo now with the play. Mulligans leads out with a Caracas. And Nick knows he's going to have to deal with this using non-legendary creatures. We'll see what his options are for that. We've got Sire of Insanity. We have Tidespout Tyrant. Chancellor of the Annex. There's a lot of cards that can potentially get the nod for Reanimator. Chancellor of the Annex does come back quite a lot just because it's often a 4 of. May not be the ideal creature, but it is the one that you're going to see the most of. And Rishadan Port actually not being used during the upkeep. I am surprised by that. This is enabling Nick to actually use a Faithless Looting. And I don't know what this mana could possibly end up being used for. We have Swamp and Lotus Petal. Animate Dead. Gonna grab the Chancellor of the Annex. Discarded off of that Faithless Looting. And he's got a Swords to Plowshares. Which I think actually... I guess he didn't pregame a Chancellor. So he drew into it. If he had pregamed that, Swords actually wouldn't work. Because there'd be the initial trigger from Chancellor and then the static ability. Or the triggered ability that it creates every time a spell is cast from your opponent. But Caracas, Swords to Plowshares, able to keep creatures off the board pretty effectively, and Nick's mana base can be attacked by these Rishadan Ports. He's going to keep pushing forward. Faithless Looting, continuing to dig. Dark Ritual going to the bin. He's got plenty of mana. 4 is more than this deck ever really wants. Though if you play enough Legacy, at some point you're going to end up like hard casting Gristlebrand or, you know, some type of insane plays. There's how you draw it out, and there's what actually ends up happening, and sometimes those diverge quite a bit. Certainly seen Omniscience hard cast and Eureka Tell. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy things that can happen in this format, but right now, Bo with a Spirit of the Labyrinth and some Rishadan Ports, which feel a little overmatched, though I would say you still want to be using them. It's going to cut off the bottom rung of makeable plays. So, for example, a Grave Titan could be a possibility here. And Faithless Looting just to get a card into the graveyard, as Spirit of the Labyrinth kind of ruins that. But we've got an Ashen Rider, and that's going to get a Path to Exile. So Nick going to be able to get a permanent out of this. And Caracas gets exiled. Is he not searching? And if I remember, it's Ashen Rider is a leave the battlefield trigger as well. I don't know if it's dies. Let me check on that. Oh, it's or dies. Okay. It's not when it leaves the battlefield. So Path to Exile, not going to trigger it. That would have been pretty sweet for Nick to be able to get rid of the Spirit of the Labyrinth, but getting rid of the Caracas is definitely something. Life total still pretty high. Bo so far handling the creatures that are thrown his way. Grave Titan's one of the scarier ones, and he's just hard castable at 6 mana. Got an Animate Dead. This one's bringing back Gristlebrand. Now, Nick has 18 life to play with. Oh, and let's see if he actually casts that. Almost cast a Serenity. So Serenity destroys all artifacts and enchantments. So that would get rid of Spirit of the Labyrinth. But you do not want to animate your Gristlebrand first. So I think Nick perhaps would have rather have just jammed a Serenity and then went on to get Gristlebrand into play. Right now he's just trying to ride out a 6-power flying lifelink. And with an opposing Batterskull, it's actually not going to work. Spirit of the Labyrinth suiting up. And everything turning sideways. 8 damage coming in. Bo gaining 7. Now, sadly, he does not have a way to convert that life into additional cards, but it is going to stop this Gristlebrand plan from actually getting there. And Nick has shown his hand. He's got a Serenity. He may need to play it. But Bo can return the Batterskull. And put it back down. I mean, it's a really challenging card to play around. Batterskull gives a ton of inevitability and has a lot of little niche synergy that you got to worry about when you're playing against it. One of my favorite things to do is return it in response to any type of Dread Return, Bridge from Below shenanigans. A lot of the time, Dredge players will miss that trick. The fact that you can pay 3 and return Batterskull at pretty much any time, and that's going to allow you to get a Germ to be very dead, which can trigger some nasty side effects in Legacy. Getting rid of Bridge from Below, top of the list. This Unmask. Going to grab a Sanctum Prelate, but Bo still has access to Recruiter of the Guard, which can potentially go get another Prelate, and now Serenity coming down. So Bo probably just swings. Nope, doesn't want to engage in that life gain situation. Nick's life total is actually way more valuable than Bo's. I'll give him that. And now a Grave Titan hardcast. Batterskull. Gonna make a real mess of this. Rest in Peace means it's Grave Titan versus Batterskull. Very little chance of other support coming in. And yeah, it's a really complicated board state, as these tokens are not going to be great at attacking into a Batterskull. Aether Vial ticks up. And the clock is ticking with this Aether Vial. It will eventually find an answer. Recruiter of the Guard. Vial currently at 1. Another Stoneforge Mystic found. And Bo is going to be able to Voltron together. Quite the germ or other creature. I mean, whatever's holding all of this equipment, even if it's a 0/0, is going to end up being very formidable. We've got a triple block on the Grave Titan. Everything dies, including the Grave Titan. And now 6 2/2s. The only resources that Nick has left. Revisiting the combat damage. We do need a little bit more patience playing over the webcam. There's really, in webcam events, I think many players will find it a lot more pleasant, as we really can't have any type of like gotcha situations. If your opponent makes a slight inaccuracy, a lot of the time that's going to be handled with a bit more grace than your typical tournament setting, as there's just so much more room for miscommunication. You can't really play things too fiercely when it comes to ensuring the game state is maintained properly. We've got a Batterskull being put onto Stoneforge Mystic. And Stoneforge has found Sword of Fire and Ice. And this is not enough zombies to get past. 6 zombies will turn to 5 once that Batterskull blocks one, which will do 10 damage, but 5 life will be gained back, and the situation just gets worse from there. Bo's going to be able to attack on his turn, gain a ton of life back. And this is a super grim situation for Reanimator, and this is honestly how this plays out so often. Death and Taxes, on paper, does not look like much, I am not going to lie. When you take a look at Sneak and Show, Tendrils, Belcher, all of the different crazy combo decks, all of the raw power cards, things like, wow, we've got a Chancellor of the Annex being cast. That's a spicy play. I don't know that that's going to be enough. I don't think it will be. Sword of Feast and Famine. I was thinking that was going to be Fire and Ice. Sword of Feast and Famine given pro black and pro green. It's going to allow for an untap. Nick discard a card and untap all his lands out. Feast and Famine very often wouldn't be brought in this matchup, as it gives your opponent a discard outlet, and very often there are cards they're going to be more than happy to have in their graveyard. A couple of dual lands taken down. The Ground Assault, not even worth it at this point. You're just going to trade away a zombie to do a total of 1 point of damage. Chancellor might as well turn sideways. Oh no, he can't. What is he at 9? He's going down to 2. Well, he could have got a swing in with Chancellor, not opting to do that. And Rashad and Ports are going to be able to do their job in making sure that Reanimator doesn't really have much of a way out of this. Just black mana to work with. Need like a Force of Vigor. And in all likelihood, Chancellor of the Annex just going to be blocking here. Oh, Flicker Wisp. Just driving that nail into the coffin a full turn earlier, thanks to Flicker Wisp. As Death and Taxes takes down Reanimator. That is what to expect with this matchup. If you've been kind of worried about playing in Legacy with Death and Taxes, fearing that, there's so many decks that are just going to absolutely stomp you, well, Reanimator is not one of them, I can tell you that. That is a very favored matchup, as Death and Taxes does what it does against the graveyard strategy. That is all for this one, but don't worry, there is a lot more. You can check out our older videos, and we're always putting out new videos from ELD's Time Vault Games in Bellingham, Massachusetts. If you want to help the channel, of course, you can like, subscribe, share, tap that notification bell so you can know the next time our new videos come out. Thanks for watching.